Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we'll be taking a look at the classic traveler scenario, The Ship in the Lake. Written by Lauren Wiseman, the scenario was first published in issue 2 of the Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society in 1979. In 2019, it was updated, expanded, and re-released for Mongoose 2nd edition Traveler in issue 1 of the new Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society, which is the version that I'll be discussing. Coming in at only 9 pages, and they're these little half-size pages here, pagelets. I mean, they're tiny. I mean, look at them. They're kind of cute. Well, as you've been told many times before, it's not the size that counts, Seth. Not cool, man. Not cool. The adventure is suited for stealth, persuasion, boating, and diving. It's more of a covert espionage adventure than a shoot-'em-up. In fact, it's possible to play this entire scenario with no combat at all. The travelers don't require a ship to do this adventure. The whole mission takes place in a single backwater world, the planet Hazel, located in the Spinward Marches, but GMs not wanting to use this particular planet can move the adventure to a different one without much difficulty. The travelers are hired by a mega corporation to locate and retrieve some data that was lost in a sunken boat. The problem is that the entire area is locked into a rebellion at the moment, and the travelers must get in, get out, without either side knowing what they're up to. The adventure only took us 1 session to complete, but as being as open as it is, your group might be able to turn this into a longer, multi-sessioned adventure. So what I'm going to do today is offer my tips and my criticisms and suggestions as a game master who has successfully run this scenario. And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm going to be giving this one to you from a player's side of things as we visit the saddest luxury hotel ever. 1 star. Though, okay, it did have a good bar, so 2 stars. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. Sweet, sweet, juicy spoilers. So any players in the audience, please stop here, but send your Game Master this way on tips on running this adventure for you. Okay, Game Masters, let's get this thing started. As I said, the adventure is more covert than it is combat, and the adventure takes place on Hazel, a Tech Level 5 backwater world comparable to the mid-20th century when it comes to technology. The first 3 or so pages of the adventure are really just the setup and the backstory, so real quick, let me give you the kind of highly abridged version. What's going on is that the megacorporation Stern Metal Horizon is trying to survey Hazel to see about any mineral deposits there, realizing that their original surveys were that there were poor deposits were all faked, which means there might actually be some deposits there. Also, and I don't know why the module gave us this logo for Stern Metal when Mongoose gave us this far cooler one in Behind the Claw. I mean, corporations do change and update their logos every few years, but Behind the Claw and JTAS Volume 1 came out almost back to back. So 7 years ago, they sent a survey team down to Hazel, and that team was then killed when the ferry they were using to cross the lake was sunk by rebels. The planet is still in sort of a stalemated civil war, but the corporation still wants to get all this survey data and hopefully use it to gain some sort of political leverage with the government as, mining operations get negotiated in the future. So for political reasons, the company doesn't want anyone knowing about their involvement in this mission, so they offer the travelers 200,000 credits to go down to Hazel, locate this sunken wreck, retrieve the data, and get back out. They'll also give a bonus of 10,000 credits if the travelers can retrieve the bodies of the original survey team, though it's up to the travelers to figure out how they're supposed to get these bodies back through customs without anybody asking any questions. Now, one thing that I added here is that the corporation provided them with some small DNA test kits in order to identify the original survey team. So because I put a lot more people that were on the ferry, meaning that there were a lot of bodies, so with these DNA kits, the travelers could go through them, test them, and figure out which ones are the corporation's employees. Because Hazel is a strict law level 7 world with armor and weapons being heavily regulated, the company offers to provide them some weapons of a suitable tech level, late 20th century or earlier, which is going to be airdropped in as well as some other supplies that the travelers might want to have bypass customs. Did you say airdrop? Holy crap, I love airdrops. Guys, we need to start coming up with a crazy list of stuff that they're going to be airdropping us. Because the job is meant to be covert, the company doesn't want the travelers, traipsing around with some high-tech plasma rifles or power armor or anything like that, drawing all sorts of unwanted attention or rousing any suspicion. The module gives us a map of the area, but I have a couple complaints with it. First, the wreck is clearly marked. Now, being the scale at 1 hex equals 10 miles, it's not an exact location, but I went ahead and removed it for our game, so the players would have to figure out where in the lake the wreck was, maybe ask some questions about the locals, and maybe get a bit of role-playing in. Holy crap, you know this is a backwater world if they're still using miles instead of kilometers. Next, I suggest going ahead and naming all the other towns in the area before the session, because your players are probably going to ask what all the towns are called, and then you have to come up with them on the fly, so just go ahead and get that over with before the session begins. Because Hazel used to have a booming tourist industry prior to the revolution, have some old travel brochures that are available in their ship's library, and from those the travelers can learn all about the lake, how deep it is, the temperature, whatnot, or anything else interesting. And they can help them when they're choosing their equipment or cover stories that they might need. The lake only goes down about 50 meters. Not too bad if you got some scuba gear on you, but that didn't stop one of our players from obsessively insisting that we just had to have some of that high-pressure deep-sea diving gear. You know, the stuff where you breathe liquid because you're 9,000 fathoms down below the surface? Eventually, Stern Metal Horizons stepped in and they were all like, no, we are not buying you that. This ain't the abyss. Go ahead and give your players this map and let them choose, when and where they want this airdrop to take place. The drop is going to be performed by a tramp trader who essentially, just kind of flies down low, opens up the door, and kicks out a couple crates before they go flying out of orbit. Also, have the travelers assist in whatever cover story they have for visiting the planet is. For my game, it was just that they were simply tourists. They were flown in on a liner, and then every week, a liner would come back to pick people up. So once they were done with the mission, they just need to board the next weekly ship. However, if things got really hairy down on the planet and they needed to get out of there as soon as possible, they'd have to figure out how to do that themselves if they couldn't wait for that liner. But then they had a rendezvous point that they could use to meet up with Stern Metal Horizons 1 parsec away. That way they could, trade the goods and get paid for their work. I suggest that you make this very clear to the travelers that this is a war zone, and drawing any unwanted attention to themselves is not likely going to go that well for them. Once the travelers arrive in the starport, they're going to have to go through customs. I suggest that you first describe the starport as being really large, but rather empty. Remember, this was a major tourist destination 20 years before, so a lot of the stuff there is going to be kind of outdated even by their own standards because, business just ain't what it used to be. Also, go through customs with them. Ask them what it is they do and the reason for visiting the planet. Remember, this is also the planetary government, checking to make sure that no outsiders are coming down here to maybe report on these rebel activities or maybe try to help the rebels out. So they're going to be asking a lot of questions to the travelers, so go ahead and role play that with them, kind of ask them some questions and see if maybe you can get them to squirm. Us? Well, we're here to go scuba diving. Yeah, that's it. Scuba diving. We're scuba people. We read in an old travel brochure that you guys got some bioluminescent seahorses or some crap, and we figured, hey, let's go all the way there to look at some freaking seahorses. So that's it. Nothing unusual about that. We just like seahorses. Think they're buying it? Now, if the travelers say they just want to head south and see some of the sights down there, then everything's going to be fine. They're going to let them pass and they're not going to ask any more questions of them. But if the travelers allude that they might be going north towards Lake Okayama, they're going to be assigned some guides/bodyguards to accompany them. Oh, yeah, that's fine. We can go ahead and opt out of having a knock with us option, can't we? Because we just prefer not to have that. I tell you what, can we just change our answer and say that we're going to go south and have no intention whatsoever of going north? Yeah, that's it. We're going to go south, so no need to give us a knock. In addition to essentially being spies to keep tourists from going down and trying to contact the different rebel forces, these guides are legitimate tour guides. Remember that this planet is desperate to rebuild its reputation as a tourist place, and Lake Okayama is a rebellion hotspot, so they want to keep all of their tourists safe and make sure that they give everybody a great Yelp review once they're done. So make this guide, or guides if you want to give them more than one, some great characters. They're friendly and they're helpful, and they give the travelers the VIP treatment, even though they're also there to keep an eye on them and stop them from trying to contact the rebels. For my game, the travelers visited the city of New Okayama, and along the way they encountered a security checkpoint, just a nice little reminder that this is a hot zone. Now, the city of New Okayama I made into this rotting luxury resort. There's empty buildings, the hotel that they stayed in was clearly fancy at one point, but most of the elevators are now busted, the carpets are stained, and nobody's bothered cleaning them up, and it's also just eerily empty. And there's barbed wire fences protecting it from some sort of rebel siege. Just a constant reminder that this is technically a war zone and there are rebels over on the far side of this lake. Now, the PCs are probably going to start asking around different questions like that, trying to get some information about this sunken ship. The module never gave a name for the sunken ferry, so I suggest that Game Masters name it. Now, either the player characters could already know the name of the ship, maybe Stern Metal Horizon gave that to them, but if they don't, they should at least have the date of when the ship went down, and then they can ask around about, any different ships that went down around that time, and then they can meet a local that can be all like, oh yeah, the Whispering Bird, I remember when she sunk 7 years ago, I can tell you all about it. I also added some rumors around the lake, and one thing I added was this rebel ship that was called Big Bertha, the scourge of the lake. It was a modified fishing vessel that had a large deck gun that was now mounted to the front, machine guns, as well as a rocket pod, and it was always supported by 2 to 3 smaller speedboats, and Big Bertha was the meanest, baddest thing on top of the lake. You can make a ship like that with a vehicle handbook, or just dumb down the strike hydrofoil from JTAS number 6, making it a regular boat instead of a hydrofoil. Again, this adventure doesn't give any direction whatsoever once the player characters land. It's completely up to them and how they want to proceed with this. Now, one thing that they're likely going to want to do is to go ahead and get to this airdrop, and depending on the size of the airdrop and where they decide that they want it to be, means that they might need to secure a vehicle in order to get there or carry anything back home with them. Now, vehicles on the planet, most of those are going to be a primitive tech level 5 or lower, but there will be some imports of higher tech levels. I did add some animals that many of the people around there ride, just to add a bit more alien feel to the world. Eventually, the PCs might start exploring the different towns that are around the lake, and I added checkpoints along the way. That way they could either try to avoid these checkpoints or try to bluff their way through them. Also, because they had their guide, they had to keep him busy while they were going out and doing all these different errands, picking up the supply drop or checking out different towns, trying to secure a boat to go out on top of the lake. So they had to take turns distracting their guide for a day. Such as one day, he took one of us out fishing, and the next day he took another one of us out scuba diving and teaching us how to drive a hovercraft. And that was pretty fun, let me tell you. But eventually, he started figuring out that something was up and getting a little bit suspicious. Now, fortunately, this was around the same time that we were ready to finally ship out and go looking for that wreck out on the lake. So we decided that we were just going to pay him off and get his silence in return. But we didn't trust that he wasn't just going to take our money, go back home, and report us as being some sort of off-world spies. So we sort of took him hostage, but under the promise that we would definitely pay him once we were done. Now, speaking of a boat, the player characters are going to have to secure a boat in order to go out and do their dive. Now, they can either steal one, they can charter one, they can repair one of the abandoned hulks, whatever it is they like. There are a lot of boats that are rusting on the docks and said to probably be abandoned, so they've got a lot of picking and choosing. It's just most of them have either been stripped for parts or so broken down that they're going to have to get parts from maybe another ship or something like that. That's all for your players to figure out. However, there's always the risk that the player characters might get ratted out or caught by somebody working for either side of the rebellion, so they're going to have to be pretty careful as how they proceed. Now, my players, they chartered a boat from a crusty old skipper who wasn't quite told what the plan was until they were already out on the water. At that point, he was held hostage under the promise of payment. Look, don't think of this as a kidnapping. Kidnapping is a dirty word. Think of this as more of a surprise fishing trip. So, surprise! We're not going fishing. Finding the wreck might take several days for them to do, and the book gives us a list of modifiers on how well they might be able to do if they gathered rumors or if they're using sonar or different drones in order to search the lake floor in order to find this missing vessel. There's also a good chance that they might cross either the government soldiers or the rebels that are patrolling the lake. Now, the ship itself is under 50 meters of water. I changed that to 40 because that's just an easier depth for divers to actually dive to. I ruled that while underwater drones will certainly help in trying to find the wreckage, the drone that's capable of being able to go in there and identify the bodies and get the suitcases that had all the data in it, the drone that they had really wasn't quite up to that, meaning that the player characters would definitely have to dive down and do the job themselves. For the dive, I added a few obstacles with, various ways that the travelers could overcome or bypass them, such as they could either use mechanic skills and cut their way through the hole in order to get inside, or they could try to use their dex athletics to try to swim through a jagged hole that was already on the side. Then, of course, they would do recon or investigate in order to search around, find stuff, and then athletic strength in order to, pull different things out of the debris once they were able to find what they were looking for. Game masters might want to add some animal life to this lake if they want to. For my game, I did some glowing seahorses. They weren't threatening, but they were kind of pretty and cool as they were swimming around. But if you want to add something that might possibly be threatening, like some sort of eel or fish or something like that, just go right ahead. Make this exciting as they're under the water. Now, during that time, half the group was underwater, diving in the wreck and making all sorts of rolls, while the other half was just sitting up on the ship and not really doing that much. So I decided to add a little bit of a hurdle for those up above, and I had the big Bertha show up and start heading their way.
Holy crap, guys, that gunboat is getting closer to us. What do? Do we flee for our lives and abandon our friends to die, or do we fight this one out?
Bertha had 2 speedboat support craft, each with a deck-mounted machine gun. Now, a difficult recon check of Bertha herself might notice that those scary rocket pods were empty. The visible nose cones were just dummies that were meant to look real scary and maybe keep people away from the boat. Now, the rebel boats are just coming in to check out the travelers, make sure that they weren't government spies or anything like that. So they came aboard, they gave a cursory inspection, asked some questions, and then just left. It made for a good tense scene that wouldn't escalate to combat unless the player characters themselves escalated it. Now, once the player characters get the goods and get off the planet, the adventure is done. Of course, if they cause trouble or anything like that, getting off the planet might be a little bit more difficult for them, but once again, that's completely for the player characters to figure out. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this adventure. It's very open and that there's a lot of ways that the PCs could do it and different directions they could go.
However, because it is so open, game masters are going to have to be on their toes with this one because there are so many directions the player characters might take this.
Game masters, you might want to prepare some different locations that appear south of the map. Places that the travelers might be claiming to be visiting once they're trying to go through customs and customs is asking them all those questions. Again, go ahead and name all the different towns that appear around the lake because you're almost guaranteed to be asked what those towns are called. Also, I suggest that you name the sunken ferry and adding the big Bertha type threat to the lake because that one worked really well for us.
I think you should have added some sort of government air force or something like that. That way the player characters have to dodge eyes from above.
Well, the module specifically points out that the thin atmosphere limits conventional flight and the planet is too low tech in order to produce grav vehicles.
Yeah, I understand why planes and helicopters won't work. That makes sense. But what about blimps? Blimps will still work here, right? The vehicle handbook gives us an entire how-to on how to create your own blimps, and flying an airship is one of the basic traveler skills, right?
Well, yeah, that would add some cool possibilities if there were some observation blimps, floating around the lake.
Yeah, too bad you didn't think about this till after you ran it.
You can find the PDF of the adventure on DriveThruRPG. You can also pick up a physical copies from the Mongoose website. I found it a fun, clandestine adventure, and hopefully you and your players will too.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews and how-tos, or our entire series on how to play Mongoose Traveler, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, travelers, you have a great day. I bought a condo down there, right? Yeah, it was one of those things where you have to sit through a 3-hour pitch seminar, but in exchange you get to have a coupon for a massage and a spa day, and the guy had a pretty good pitch, so I went ahead and invested all the way in. Yeah, I know it's on a backwater war zone, but it is a seriously good investment opportunity that I am sure that I am not going to regret.